Developed and published by Techland, Dying Light 2 Stay Human has finally made it to release after a number of delays. As a sequel, it does pretty well by improving on its gameplay, making it a blast to play. However, it does falter here and there. So the game takes place about 22 years after the events of the first game, and a lot has happened since then. Haran, the city from the first game, has been completely overrun with infected after the outbreak of the virus, with none of its citizens surviving. A vaccine is eventually developed and the zombie pandemic comes to an end. However, the experiments on the virus continue and a mutated variant of the virus escapes and starts a second pandemic. The new virus is completely unaffected by the vaccine but can be managed using UV light. Most of humanity is wiped out and survivors are scattered across a handful of human settlements. One such settlement is Villador, one of the last remaining cities and also where the events of Dying Light 2 take place. Players will assume the role of Aiden Caldwell, a pilgrim who ventures to Villador in the hopes of finding his long-lost sister Mia. Pilgrims are individuals who are brave enough to travel between human settlements, and as such they're quite highly sought after to take on jobs no one else wants to do. Following his leads on his sister to Villador, Aiden discovers that the city is a powder keg with 3 different factions vying for control: the Peacekeepers, the Survivors, and the Renegades. Aiden will have to work with all 3 groups in order to get closer to finding his sister. The story in Dying Light 2 starts off a bit slow but does pick up a little once you've made your way into the city of Villador. The main narrative is interesting as you trudge up more details of Aiden's past, but I never really felt particularly interested in his mission. Aside from that, Aiden isn't all that interesting. Thankfully, the other characters you'll meet can be quite likable, or at the very least a little more compelling than our main protagonist. The game also features some choices that affect how the city changes over time. Some of the choices do affect how the game ends, but they mainly determine which side missions will be available to you. Additionally, it's possible to be as much of an asshole as you'd like to be and never have to face any consequences for it. Now let's talk about the gameplay, which is arguably the best part of Dying Light 2. The first game did a really good job at delivering a parkour experience that was incredibly addictive. It was a pleasure to make your way from one point to another, and the sequel improves upon this quite a bit. The parkour as a whole feels refined and more fluid when compared to that of its predecessor. This is made quite apparent pretty early on as you discover just how much work has gone into improving it. Aside from new ways to traverse Villador such as monkey bars, ropes, and smoothly vaulting over obstacles, there's even a parkour skill tree that features 20 unlockable skills to choose from every time you level up. It's absolutely thrilling to dart across Villador by leaping from rooftop to rooftop as you avoid the infected roaming in the streets below. It's especially fun when you can chain a number of maneuvers into a single run without missing a jump over a gap. There are a number of really cool things that you can pull off as you get further into the game, and because of this, the traversal never ever feels like a chore. Since you're not going to be able to run from just everything, you're eventually going to have to fight. Dying Light 2 has a strong focus on melee combat and improves on the foundation laid by its predecessor. When you first get your hands on a weapon, you can pretty much just wail on whatever's in front of you, but it gets more engaging once you learn how to parry, dodge, and manage a group of enemies. The common infected can be dealt with by doling out a flurry of slashes, but the larger, tougher ones, in addition to the human enemies, will require you to consider the best plan of attack. The environment can also provide some opportunities to turn the tide in your favor thanks to some strategically mounted spike strips and bottles and bricks. The latter can be thrown at an enemy to stagger them and leave them open to attacks. It's actually immensely satisfying to parry an incoming attack, leapfrog over the staggered enemy, and then dropkick one of his friends off of a rooftop. Actually, just delivering dropkicks on their own is a whole lot of fun. Of course, this is all well and good during daylight hours. When night falls, the challenge is switched up somewhat. The hulking infected roam the streets, and zombies capable of scaling tall structures can follow you up onto rooftops. Additionally, there are screeching zombies called howlers who will summon every zombie to chase you if they happen to spot you. You're welcome to try and take them all on, but sometimes the best course of action is to leg it for the closest source of UV light. Going out at night is completely optional, save for a few missions where it's compulsory, but it can be quite rewarding. Firstly, you earn double the amount of XP, which is helpful for leveling up. Secondly, there are a number of dark hollows dotted across the map, which house fewer zombies at night since they're all out in the town, making them easier to sneak through and loot their precious crafting materials and valuables. The catch, however, is that Aiden is infected with the virus. In fact, everyone in Villador is. The only way to not turn into a zombie is by having constant exposure to UV light, be it natural or artificial. There's a finite amount of time that you can spend in the dark before needing to recover in light. Initially you have a 5-minute time limit, however this can be increased by increasing your health and stamina with an injectable upgrade item. There are also items such as immunity boosters and UV mushrooms that can be used to deliver a temp boost to your timer. It's a nice twist and adds a layer of risk to the gameplay. When it comes to performance, Dying Light 2 is a bit of a mixed bag. Glitches currently range from simple graphical ones to game-breaking bugs that can bring your progression to a screeching halt. There have been a handful of patches thus far which have made the game a lot more playable, however some players are still affected by some unresolved issues. Visually, it runs pretty well in performance mode, which is what I used during my playthrough since it delivered a smooth 60 FPS while reducing the resolution to 1080p. Resolution mode gets it as close to 4K as possible, delivering some crisper visuals, however this does reduce the frame rate to 30 FPS. Finally, there's quality mode, which reduces the resolution to 1080p and the frame rate to 30 FPS, but provides improved shadow and lighting effects. It's worth experimenting with each one to see what works best for you. The enemy variety on show is quite nice, but this rings true more for the infected than it did for the human enemies. At one point I recall seeing identical enemy character models standing next to each other. It's like I was fighting twins or something. The voice acting is pretty solid too, but this isn't always the case. Many of the key characters have been voiced well, but I ran into instances with side characters where the voice acting was quite noticeably bad. Dying Light 2 is a decent sequel. While Aiden and his story aren't particularly compelling, the characters that he encounters are. Not to mention that there are some great set pieces throughout the campaign. The parkour and the combat have been refined to a point that they each feel like notable improvements from the first game. The game does need some work where bugs are concerned though, and the voice acting has a tendency to be middling here and there. But the thing is, if you enjoyed the first game, then Dying Light 2 is a good fit since it greatly improves on how much fun can be had. If you enjoyed this review, please hit that like button, and if you are new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. And if you got your hands on Dying Light 2 Stay Human, please let me know what you thought of the game in the comments section down below. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.